What's up, guys? Let's take a look at another CodeWars exercise. This one's called distance from the average. It gives you a list of numbers, which could represent anything, test scores, speed run times, whatever, and it asks how does each one relate to the average. This is very important in a lot of situations. A number doesn't matter without context. Like if I learn that a basketball player is 6'3", well, that seems tall, but is it taller than the average basketball player? I don't know. It would be nice to find out. So let's give it a shot. I'm going to write the long way first, which is called the procedural way. What do we do step by step in order? And then I'm going to condense it to something a little shorter using built-in functions and algorithms. So in order to get the distance from the average, first we need the average. In order to get the average, first we need the total. Let's get the total and use that for the rest. I could say total equals 0 and then add each one until we got it. So let's go for item in, they call this test list because it could be anything. So my name item is vague, it could be anything. And we can just go total plus equals item, which means by the end of this loop, it'll add them all. Now to get the average, we take the total divided by the amount, and you get the amount with the len function. Len is the length, so if it has 5 things, it'll give you 5. Now we need the distance from each one to the average. And they want that in a list, so I'm going to make a list called distances. And then for item in test list, I'm going to append to the distances, because this is adding an item onto the list, with average minus item. Okay, so average minus item is the distance between those two. Maybe we want to do absolute value if you want me to be positive. Maybe we'll have to round. We'll see what happens. But after going through, this does get all the differences, and then we can return that and see what happens. Okay. It looks like we passed most of the tests, but you can see that they don't want this. They want it to be a nice decimal, 1 or 2 points. That's it. Most of the time math is pretty, you know, addition, subtraction, multiplication. You give it some integers, it'll give you integers back, no problem. But division is not pretty. You can give it integers and it can give you an error if one of them is 0, or it can give you a really weird looking ugly number like these repeating decimals, or it can just give you a decimal in the first place, which is not the same type as your integer inputs. So they want us to round. Let's see in the directions. They say round to 2. Okay, they're using an example from Clojure, which is a different language, but I can still see that it says round to 2. Okay. So in Python, we have a function called round, and then you give it the thing we're rounding and how many places. Recently, you've seen me use the f-string format to do this, but that was for strings. This is a number. So now, let's hit test, and I think we're good. That's all we need. I'm going to change it, though, because this is way too many lines. I mean, the title is 4 words, distance from the average, and that really does express the whole idea in 4 words. So I hope it doesn't take 10 lines of code to do that. We can shorten this quite a bit. First of all, I've told you guys recently that we never have to go through and add the sum. That bell seems longer than usual. Maybe it's just because nobody's around. We never have to add the sum directly because there's a sum function that does it, and it does it well. So we can just call the sum function instead of starting at 0, adding 1 at a time. We can get them all. I'm going to replace this with sum of the list, and then I don't need any of these lines. I'm going to hit test to make sure I didn't mess it up, and it turns out we're good. This is very readable, sum of the list over the length. We know that's what average is. Great. I bet there's a way to import an average function, or they probably call it mean, but this is totally fine for me. And then the list is another pattern we see a lot. If you ever find yourself adding up totals, you can use the sum. If you ever find yourself adding things to a list, you can use a list comprehension. List comprehensions are made for this exact scenario where we start empty, we add things one at a time. Instead, we can express it all in one line. So what do? We say this thing for this thing. And then we don't need any of that. It says round the average for each item in the list. Lovely. It's more like you would say it in English. You wouldn't say, hey, we're going to create an empty list and then we're going to go through a loop of another thing. You would say, hey, we're going to get the rounded average for each item, right? This is much more straightforward and expressive in addition to being shorter. Shorter is nice, but if you can do something in 3 lines and it's better than 1 line, keep it. If you can do something in 1 line and it's better and more straightforward and there's less fluff and there's more order where you put the important stuff first, that's what we like. Now, I don't even need to give it a name anymore because I'm totally ready to just return that list as it is. And we're good. And I'm going to hit attempt to give it the tougher tests because you never know, maybe there's some trick in there. But look at that, we got it. So not only did we get it, but we made it nice. We made it from, remember it was 10 lines, and now it's just 3. And this is honestly more readable, more changeable, more efficient actually behind the scenes. These algorithms work a tiny bit faster than doing it by hand, and it just looks nice. So let's check for a minute the other solutions from other people to see if there are any surprises. Okay, so this person did import a mean function. NumPy is a library that has a lot of numerical calculation, and you use it for statistics and things like that. Great, but their second line is just like ours, round average minus x to 2 for x in list. Perfect. This one is exactly like ours on the first part, and then over here they use a map. Map is where you take a function and apply it to everything in a sequence, and it does the same job as a list comprehension. It's just less common in Python. Some languages like JavaScript or Rust or Haskell, they use map all the time and it works for them. This one using the NumPy, and they use round from that and mean from that. I don't know if round from NumPy is any different than the built-in Python round. Probably not. We're seeing pretty much the same stuff. If we scroll all day, you might find a unique one, but otherwise it's going to be, hey, look at this person made a average function. Very nice. If you were going to do that a bunch in the same program, you were going to get the average over and over again, it'd be nice to write the name instead of writing out all the steps every time, even though it's just 2 steps. Okay, and that's it. We want to start making a nice big loose first draft, and then we condense it into a beautiful tight second draft. That's always the best way to go. Thanks.